Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The History Squad. Now today's video is about the torture and execution of a 25-year-old lady called Anne Askew during the latter reign of Henry VIII. What prompted me to do this is I was recently at the Tower of London in London, and at the base of the White Tower they have the rack, the torture implement, said to be one of the worst. And a little mention about the fact that Anne Askew was put to the rack. But there's more to the story than meets the eye. So, Anne Askew, who was she? Born in 1521 in Lincolnshire, she was the fourth of 5 children to William Askew and Elizabeth Wriothesley. These are great names, aren't they? Her father was a gentleman of the court of Henry VIII. He also sat as a juror in the trial of some of the co-accused of Anne Boleyn. So this is quite a powerful family. She was also related to the chap who led the Pilgrimage of Grace, Robert Aske. Now, all is going well. Anne is very, very well educated. She is Protestant. She reads the Bible in English, and she will tell anybody around her about what she reads. Now, later on, she becomes an Anabaptist preacher, and she will actually preach the sermon. She will memorize verses from the Bible in public. And this is where it all goes awry, because her sister Martha is going to marry Thomas Kyme. He is a staunch Catholic. Oh, we've got this religion bit going on here. And then Martha, bless her, God rest her soul, dies. So William Askew, thinking about the money, saves money by betrothing his daughter Anne to Thomas Kyme. So there you have a well-educated young lady who reads the Bible in English, is a Protestant, is now married to a Catholic, a staunch Catholic. One of the questions from Anne is all about the transubstantiation, the breaking of the bread and wine in the Catholic Mass. Have a look at it yourself. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to get tangled in these questions of religion. It's going to be an acrimonious marriage. It's not going to go well. But she produces 2 children. And then her husband kicks her out. He's had enough of her. And she moves to London, where she becomes a gospeller, a preacher walking around the streets. She preaches from the Gospels. And she's also accused here of plain speaking. In other words, telling people the scriptures and verses of the Bible, the New Testament, in plain English. It's frowned upon. In 1545, she's arrested. Her husband has been ordered, get your wife back to your house. In other words, get her off the streets of London, will you? So she's taken back to Lincolnshire and she escapes. I love this girl. She escapes, goes back to London and continues her preaching as a gospeller, as an Anabaptist. There's just some extra little bits about Anne Askew. When her husband threw her out, she used her maiden name. So she was Anne Askew again. Also, she petitioned the king. Don't forget, this is a powerful family, really. Petitioned the king, Henry VIII, to divorce her husband. She was the first woman in England to do so. Wow! And of course, Henry VIII, being the fair-minded chap he was, refused it. Right? Now, there's another part to this, Anne Askew. She was a poet and a writer, and she was the first lady to compose poetry in English. What a girl. But she ended up getting arrested in March 1546. But she was released. But she was arrested again May 1546. But this time taken to the Tower of London. So poor Anne had been arrested and taken to the Tower as a part of a sweep where 23 radical Protestants have been arrested on the orders of the Bishop of Winchester, Stephen Gardiner. He, though, had a bit of a subplot. You see, he was in cahoots with the king. Although the king had brought great religious reforms in England, founding the Church of England, he still retained much of the Catholic faith. In fact, many said he died a good Catholic. But he was against radical Protestants and he was against heresy. And this is part of what it's all about, except Gardner was going for the Queen, Catherine Parr. She had ignored the active advancement of the true religion, a new act, which basically said that women and those of the lower orders were not allowed to read the Bible in English, not even in private. This is suppression. So Gardner was going for the Queen and singled out Anne Askew, believing that she would actually name the Queen as a radical Protestant who had committed heresy. Boy, was he wrong. So poor Anne finds herself in the Tower of London, and boy, is she interrogated. But she will not give any names, so they're going to torture her. So permission is granted for her to be placed on the rack. Now the rack, it's one of the most awful things you can imagine. You're stretched until your limbs can literally tear apart. But it's illegal to torture a woman in England at this time. And when the Constable of the Tower, Anthony Kingston, is ordered to do it, he refuses. Wow. He goes to the king. Hey, king, can you give me pardon? But I can't do this. It's illegal. So the king says, you're pardoned. You're forgiven. But they still go ahead and they place poor Anne on the rack. She describes how she was stripped of all of her clothes except for her shift, her undergarment. She is then have the loops of the rope around her wrists and then her ankles. And it's the Lord Chancellor, Thomas, now I can never know if I'm pronouncing this right. It's either Wriothesley or Wriothesley and Richard Rich who actually do the stretching. They stretch her so much that she tells you she was at least 5 inches suspended above the bed of the rack. Oh my goodness me, the agony from that. She passes out. So they bring her around and they continue on. They stretch her so much, there are 2 accounts. One says that her tendons snapped. The other says that her joints were dislocated. Well, if your tendons snap, I'll tell you this, there's nothing holding your sockets in place. Shoulders, elbows, knees, and ankles. The screams of this poor woman being tortured illegally by the state in the Tower of London could be heard outside the White Tower. She's in the basement, by people walking in the garden. In fact, one of those was the wife of the Constable of the Tower who's walking their daughter. This is horrendous. But she would not give any names, no evidence against the Queen. So when they've finished with her, she's taken to a private house apparently to recover. How do you recover from that? She is now condemned to death. Heresy. She's going to burn at the stake. So she's taken to Newgate Prison and incarcerated there. So Anne had been illegally tortured. Only one other woman had been tortured like this in our history. Margaret Chain, 1537. She'd been on the Pilgrimage of Grace. But on the 16th of July, 1546, Anne Askew is going to be executed in Smithfield with 3 others, John Lascelles, John Hemley, and John Hadlam. But she can't walk from the prison. She can't walk from Newgate because she's totally crippled and in absolute agony. Can you imagine having your shoulders, your arms, your legs all torn from their sockets? Yeah, it's enough when you sprain your ankle, isn't it? So they carry her on a chair, and every jolt, every stumble causes her absolute agony. And then in front of the crowd at Smithfield, the 3 guys are already chained up. They drag, so witnesses say, Anne from the chair to the stake. They then chain her, ankles, legs, but she's actually sat on astride a little chair that they'd fastened to the post. Then her arms and then her neck. Now there are 2 versions here. One is that the executioner wanted to dispose of these people quickly, so he tied a big bag of gunpowder around their necks, and when the flames rose up, boom, they're dead. That's an English way. However, there's an eyewitness who watched the whole thing, and he sees how they drag her to the post, how they sit her, straddle her, he says, on the chair, how they chain her ankles, knees, waist, arms and neck to the post, how they light the fire. And witnesses say she didn't cry out until the flames reached her chest. She never told anybody any names, co-conspirators, or anything against the Queen. Eyewitnesses said she died so bravely. What a tale. Well, in modern times now, she is regarded as a Protestant martyr. To me, I think she must have been one heck of a girl. Anne Askew, in my book, one of the bravest women I've ever heard of. Well, such a sad story this is of Anne Askew. I'm not going to ask you if you enjoyed it, but I suppose if you did, give us a thumbs up if you would. And if you're going to subscribe, press that subscribe button. But please, just a little note here, press the all notification buttons. We've been finding out that some of our subscribers haven't been getting notifications, and that apparently is the reason why. Now, before I go, a mention for some of my Patreons there. We've got Peter Cost, Craig S, and Mr. Tibbs. Hey guys, thank you very much indeed. See you soon.